Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the second round of the NGK SPARK PLUG Esports Cup for 2022. We're here at Circuit Paul Ricard. This round of the championship. My name is, of course, Connery Medic, and I'll be your commentator for this evening's proceedings as we try to find yet another set of drivers to join us in the grand final. We'll explain more about that later on, but welcome one and all to the Race Room channel, of course, on the NGK SPARK PLUG social media as well. I'm very thankful that you're all able to join us here for this one. We're watching practice going on out there at the moment for the final couple of minutes of this session. And we can use this time just to give you a little bit of a rundown of how things are going to work here today. Of course, we are in the second round of the season. You can see that there. We had our first round over and done with at the Dubai Autodrome. And now we are here in Circuit Paul Ricard for round number 2. By the way, the qualifiers for round number 3 are already open. So if you feel confident enough that you'll be able to get yourself a good enough lap time in the time attack, then you can potentially join us for race number 3. Get in, get involved, and maybe you'll be able to join us at Imola. But for now, we've got Circuit Paul Ricard to get out of the way first. And then, of course, we've got 2 races afterwards as well before we get ourselves our grid set for the grand finale at the Nordschleife. This is how the structure is going to work today then. We've got qualifying coming up in just a handful of minutes time before we get ourselves our first race, 20 minutes. Then, of course, we'll get ourselves the second race, which will be, well, the grid for that will be based on a reverse grid from the results of race number 1 for the top 10 cars, which is always a very, very interesting predicament indeed. But for now, we'll just have to take a look at where we are racing today. Here's a track guide on Paul Ricard. Let's have a look at how to tackle this circuit then. Paul Ricard, of course, home to the French Grand Prix in Formula 1 in recent times. You can see the track record set by Sebastian Vettel in his Ferrari in Formula 1. 15 curves at this racetrack. As we see, we had ourselves through that first sector, that first chicane. That can be pretty wide open. Of course, you want to try and get your car all over these curves here at Paul Ricard, here at least in Race Room, as you head down in towards the sort of second complex here. Turn 2, turn 3, again, hug that curb on the inside, on the left side, all the way around. Hop yourself over the curb for the tighter apex before you wind yourself through 3, and then coming up through towards turn 4, that fast left-hander, leading you on to the Mistral Straight. This is going to be your main point for slipstreaming and potential overtaking down into the next heavy braking zone. That's what I expect to see coming down here. So potentially a lot of action down into this sequence of corners. Hard onto the brakes into the chicane, of course. Be careful you don't take the wrong chicane through here, as many a Formula 1 driver has done when when that series came here for the first time. Clean and tidy is required out of that chicane to be able to go onto this mini straight on the way down in towards the very fast turn number 5. Got to get the right angle into here. Maybe got to maximize the track entry as well. Make sure you have 2 tires over that curve to make sure you can get the fastest run possible through that corner. Winding yourself through this very, very long right-hander. The car on the limit of grip coming through there, and of course you have to get a pitch-perfect line to be able to maximize the lap time, heading your way in towards turn 7 now. Again, keeping it close to that inside there. Of course, it all gets a little bit more tricky when you're going wheel-to-wheel through here, which, with how close this field is, you'll perhaps expect to see over the course of this race. Hang into the final couple of corners now. The actual final corner coming up now. There's a little bit of an oversteer from our driver there as we angle our way through that final corner, launching across the start-finish line. Very short pit straight here at Paul Ricard. That was a look at how to negotiate this circuit, and just about on cue, we head into qualifying. to set the grid for race 1. Of course, we won't have a second qualifying for race number 2. That will be, well, the grid will be based on the results of race 1 with the top 10 reversed. So this is going to be your only qualifying session of today, and we're currently looking at the driver of Cody Lutovsky. In the obviously everyone's in an AMG Mercedes GT3 for this season, of course, so everything equal in terms of the balance of performance when everyone's in the same manufacturer, so we won't be able to get into that argument here today. Of course, to explain a little bit more about the series, of course, these are technically, for all intents and purposes, qualifying races here today, because there's no prizes on offer today. Yes, there are points, but the points are all are sort of secondary. You want to finish inside of the top 4 here today in points to get yourself qualified. However, if you don't finish inside the top 4 at any of the races so far in this sort of quote-unquote qualifying season, and as long as you finish inside the top 16 in points overall across all the races, then you'll still get yourself a slot booked in that final. So it's not over and done with if you can't finish in the top couple of positions here today. If you have a consistent run throughout the rest of the season, then you might still have a chance at getting yourself qualified for that final event. And it is that final event where the only prizes are going to be given out. It's not going to be based on of anything that has come before, so you do have to sort of hedge your bets all on that final race. Well, I say final race, it's more like final 2 races, but you do get my point. The first place in the championship gets 2 VIP tickets to the 24-hour race at the Nürburgring for 2022 with entry to the SX Lounge. Second place in the championship will get themselves a €450 coupon for simracing-store.com. And third place in the championship gets themselves 1 JBL Quantum 1 headset. So some okay prizes on offer here, especially that experience at the Nürburgring to go and watch the Nürburgring 24-hour race in style in the SX Lounge. That's absolutely fantastic stuff. I'm certainly going to be pretty jealous of whoever's able to get that. Never been to view a Daytona, well, not Daytona, a Nürburgring 24-hour event myself, so that would be a very interesting experience. But we are sort of getting our first laps underway here in the qualifying session. Here's the onboard with Royce Rocco here, as he's gone purple through Sector 1. Of course, that can be a little bit weird with regards to whether that is accurate or not sometimes, but Royce Rocco going along very well at the moment. He's got a little bit of the tail end of the slipstream with those cars ahead of him. You prefer to be perhaps a little bit closer at this point. Purple through Sector 2 is looking good as well, so it looks like it's a tidy lap so far for Royce Rocco here in this one as he angles himself into that fast right-hander of turn number 5. Then, well, into the long right-hander of I can't pronounce French corners, unfortunately, turn number 6 as he hits his way through there. Of course, these are not the same drivers, or largely not the same drivers that we saw in the first round of competition, of course, because it is a separate leaderboard to get yourself qualified into this one. And, well, if you don't do that, then eventually you will have to miss out. But, of course, the top 4 over the course of the last race were automatically qualified, so they don't need to run all the races this season. They just need to basically finish the top 4 and then, of course, complete the final race. But across the line then, for the first couple of flying laps in this event, Royce Rocco P2 on the starting grid, at least initially. Latowska had a very good final sector to promote the Macedonian up into provisional pole position for the moment. The rest of the lap time starting to come through. Bo Dixon about 0.6 of a second adrift of your race leader, and that's off-track excursion through the first sector is certainly not going to help, and he does take the tow back to pit lane to try and get himself back out there. Of course, if you do abuse the track limits here, you will get yourself an off-track, and you will get yourself your lap invalidated. So it is within your best interest to keep it all within the grey stuff. Of course, a lot of runoff here at Circuit Paul Ricard. It's quite famous for it, with these sort of the very tyre-destroying runoffs here. Of course, out into the blue, there's slightly more abrasion than the race circuit, and of course, if you get into the red, then there's a huge amount of abrasion that can indeed ruin the tyres, at least in the real world. But as we head in towards the final 5 minutes of the qualifying session, Latowska very much towards the very front of the order right now, 0.2 of a second ahead of everyone else. Something very competitive lap times indeed, and has a drafting buddy ahead, which is so important in these sorts of qualifying sessions, especially given that it is an open session. You're not all alone out there, you versus the track. You do have this other traffic to deal with as well. Quite a rarity actually in sim racing that we get this kind of open qualifying sessions, at least with sim racing that I'm familiar with. However, we will get ourselves the next couple of laps come in relatively shortly. So who can upset Zlotowska at the very front of the order? Having a look further down the field for the drivers that have not set themselves lap times just yet. We've got Ilya Dravosikov down the order, the Swiss driver that has not yet set himself a qualifying time. We see how he'll do so far. He does set a personal best through Sector 1, but no drafting buddy ahead will mean this lap is a little bit more of a struggle than it should be, but we'll continue to watch his progress. Of course, you really want to be setting an early lap time here. You'd at least want to have that lap time to fall back on, just in case the rest of the session doesn't go your way. And if you're now 3 minutes before the end of the session, you still haven't set a lap time, things start to get a little bit more sketchy. And well, Dravosikov, clean Sector 2 as well. Not the fastest by any means, but as long as he hooks up Sector 3 here, should be a semi-competitive lap time, at least books a slot on the starting grid. That's a little bit further up than P26 at the moment. That is a long way down the order for a driver of such talent, but coming up towards the, well, coming through the last portions of Sector 3 now, you can see him struggling with the steering a little bit, struggling to get that car nosed in, and then gets a whole bunch of oversteer coming off the corner, which is not ideal whatsoever. Of course, during the race, that will mean that more heat goes into the tyres. The tyre wear is going to be a little bit accelerated as a result of that if you drive it too hard, so there might be an issue towards the end of the race, and you can see Dravosikov continuing to slide around at this stage. And across the line, I don't think it's going to be too representative of a lap time up to P12, but he was a little bit all over the place, especially through that final sector. But either way, still P12 in the starting grid for Dravosikov. I think it's the driver of Latowski that remains down on towards pit lane, just about getting out now. Whether or not he'll be able to get back around and complete another lap, I don't think he will. Vitvo also comes down on towards the pit lane, so he wasn't able to improve on his lap time, or rather get himself up into provisional pole position. That is still Latowski's by about a tenth of a second at this point. Here's Michi Geisler, who is not on a lap at the moment, so time is certainly starting to run out. Here's Sinyan Gune though. Look at that. Purple through Sector 1, purple through Sector 2 as well. So this is looking like a very, very positive time for Sinyan Gune, the Turkish driver. But it requires a tidy Sector 3 to potentially challenge the driver at the very top of the order right now. So the Absolute Motorsport Racing Team car making his way through that final sector, knows what's on the line, and again another little sign of oversteer coming through that left-hander. We saw that, of course, with the driver that we were on board with, but now winding his way through, has to hook up these corners absolutely perfectly. Was there a little bit of a problem there though? There was a problem for Sinyan Gune. I don't know what it was, but either way it causes him to take the tow back to pit lane. That was looking like a fantastic lap for Gune, but unfortunately it wasn't to be, and it is Latowski that takes pole position here for the first race of the NGK SPARK PLUG ESPORTS CUP for 2022 at Circuit Paul Ricard. Luciano Vitvo P2 with Michi Geisler in P3 with Enzo Filipao in P4. Sinyan Gune lines up in P5 for the race. Uval Rusen in P6 with Sebastian Reed P7. Ben Sarkis P8 with Nico Cernel in P9, and Bo Dixon will line up 10th place on the starting grid here today. Last-ditch effort from Ilya Dravosikov, promotes himself up into P9, so that puts Cernel and Dixon down to P10 and P11 respectively, and Pedro Gomez P12. The rest of the runners are slowly but surely cycling their way through on your screen right now. Of course, those drivers towards the bottom of the order, Venieri, Ardai, and of course we've got Grassman down there as well. P26, P77, P28. They'll be hoping for a little bit of a better race than they had qualifying. So we get ourselves the gridding procedure underway then for round number 2 of the NGK SPARK PLUG ESPORTS CUP 2022. We are very thankful you're able to join us here on Race Room for this round of the championship. And, well, if the Dubai races were anything to go by, then we potentially might have quite an exciting event here today, especially in the mid-pack, where it seems like those guys were going side by side throughout the races at Dubai. But what does Circuit Paul Ricard have to offer here in the second round? We will just have to wait and see. Relatively short run down in towards turn number 1, of course, so there's a chance that the drivers will still be all stacked up, heading their way down into there, but we've got a maximum of 10 seconds left to go, and in fact, we'll skip all of that and get ourselves ready for round number 2 of the NGK SPARK PLUG ESPORTS CUP. It's about to get underway here from Paul Ricard. Race number 1, 20 minutes. Goes green, and Rasmus Salo has already got himself a drive-through penalty for a false start as we see the field fan out on the way down in towards turn number 1. Latoska has the race lead coming down in towards turn 1, but Vitvo will try and commit towards the outside to try and take the race lead away, but there's no space, simply no space through there. Someone's gone off in the background. It's caused a big scatter. That is Sebastian Reed spun in front of traffic. That is not what you want to see coming through turn number 1 for the first time. There are multiple drivers having problems. Parvan is in it as well. That was Nagy, actually. That was nosed into the barriers there through that first little chicane. So big moment further down the order. Didn't quite see what caused it. And of course, we can't quite get the replays here, unfortunately, on this particular stream. But either way, multiple drivers having problems early on in this 20-minute event. Onto the Mistral for the first time then. Vitvote closing in from behind. He's already going to go for an early move on the race leader down in towards the back straight chicane as Vitvote has the race lead now. He gets the pass done. Latoski will have to just cut his losses for now, but there's still ample opportunity to respond over the course of this race. I get the feeling it will be a big slipstream pack, slipstream train on the way down the back straight pretty much every single time. Having a look further down though, we do of course have Sinyan Gine. He's been able to promote himself up into 4th place, but he's being challenged by Yuval Rosen. Rosen getting the elbows out, sticking his way down the inside. Still can't get anything done there, of course, and actually Dravosikov will capitalize on all of that. The Swiss driver up into P5 now. We do have quite a leading train, though. We have a little bit of a split in the pack, I would have thought, as a result of the incident that we saw through turn 1. What's happened to Uval Rosen now? Because he's being challenged by Bo Dixon. Dixon not quite able to squeeze his way through just yet. He'll continue to try and knock on the door, coming through those final couple of corners to the end of the lap to complete the first lap here. Of course, a 20-minute event here for the first race. It'll be 20 minutes for the second race as well, albeit with a reverse grid for the top 10. As we head our way down in towards turn number 1 then. There's a battle behind for P10 between Ben Svarkas and Peter Daniel. Peter Daniel attempting to try and clear up on the outside there, but unsuccessful. Turn number 1 isn't really the most major of overtaking points at this racetrack. It's a very tough sequence of corners to go side by side through as well, so very risky indeed. Bo Dixon looking all over the back, and what's happened to Sinyan Gine here? Gine, oh, just all sorts of out of shape and stacking up drivers behind him. Dravosikov has been able to get through up into P4. And all of these drivers scrapping over P4 is allowing the front 3 to get away. You can see them charging off in the distance already. That is not what this battle for P4 wants to see. They want to be involved in the thick of things in that top 3. But of course, P4, of course, it is major points and certainly contributes to you finishing top 4 in terms of the points at the end of today as well. So you can see why this position is so sought after, especially when we're so early on in race number 1. As you can see, Gine going right to driver's right-hand side, trying to cover off any move that Dravosikov was thinking of. Keeps everyone behind for now, but I get the feeling people are being stacked up at the moment because Bo Dixon now senses an opportunity through the long right-hander of turn 6 try and get past Ilya Dravosikov. Another attempt for Bo Dixon. Again, trapped on the outside here for the left-handers. Not really going to be conducive to any passes as both of them overcommit to it slightly, as Dravosikov got the back end out a little bit, and we can ride on board now with Yuval Rosen because he's got all of this going on ahead of him. He goes for the absolute send down the inside of Bo Dixon. That is an authoritative move from Yuval Rosen. Is it going to result in the pass? No, I don't think so, as Dravosikov gets tagged and spun out the side of the final corner. What a mess in the battle for P4. Dravosikov's not going to be too happy about that. Someone has a sympathy spin in the background there. I think it was Suron Yaga down the order, but that is not how he'd like to race here in the NGK SPARK PLUG Esports Championship. You have to give yourself a little bit more space. Well, the hopeful dives were there. Space was given in some instances, but you hate to see it end in tears like that. And we've got, well, we're just about 5 minutes into this race now. And our battle for P4 is all but fizzled away. We've got Sinyan Gene P4 at the moment, Bo Dixon P5, Schernel out of all of that. He's promoted himself up into P6, gaining a couple of positions over those drivers that fell down the order, like Rosen and Dravosikov. Ben Farkas up into P7, Daniel P8, but he's challenging for P7 at the moment and putting the Hungarian driver of Ben Farkas behind him. And here comes Yuval Rosen now for, on all intents and purposes, on a recovery drive now, as the Israeli driver looks to try and file his way somehow through this field. Of course, the benefit for Rosen at the moment, and the benefit for pretty much everyone in this little pack at the moment, is that this is the bottom end of the top 10. So therefore, these are going to be the drivers. If they finish where they are, they're going to benefit the most out of the reverse grid for race 2. So there's a bunch of strategy going on here. Even though we have no scheduled pit stops in this series, still got to think about your positioning out there on circuit, as you can see Lucas Vollering heading his way, at least attempting down the inside of Rosen, but Rosen is able to cover it off for now. Vollering will continue on the pressure though. Pressure is half the battle in racing sometimes. If you can force the driver ahead of you into a mistake, then, well, you've got, you're going to have at least an opportunity to try and breeze yourself by. The line then to complete yet another lap. Things calm down a little bit here in the at the very front of the order due to all that separation, not only from the first lap, first corner incident, but of course the incident that we saw with Dravosikov spun in front of traffic and everyone having to stack up and get caught out in that one. But looking back, we've got Geisler trying to pull off a pass on his fellow countryman of Nick Schmank. Two Germans going wheel to wheel through these corners now. Geisler losing a little bit of ground on the inside. Does become the outside. Oh no, was there a little bit of door-to-door contact? I don't know, but either way, both of them with the synchronized half spin and losing a good couple of positions here as well. This is crucial points lost. Remember, if you don't finish inside the top 4 in points from this single race, in terms of the overall point standings, if you finish inside the top 16, you still get yourself a chance to compete in that final race. So every point is still worth it, even if you think you might finish outside of the top 4 at the end of the day. As we'll see Royce Rocco now attempt to go for a move on Alita Ardai. This is the battle for P18-19 on circuit. And Royce Rocco able to get that position done quite easily, in fact, as, well, there's no love lost in the battles back here. We're towards the back of the order, yet they're fighting like it's for the race win. See Krivy getting himself involved now. Geisler, you got Grassman here in this one as well. All sort themselves out. Single file. Geisler still locked onto the back of Krivy though. Might cause him a little bit of a problem, but we'll have to get ourselves focused back towards a little bit further up the order, as long as these guys maybe calm down a little bit. There are battles going on further ahead. We've got Yuval Rosen there with Vollering. Of course, these guys been stuck together like glue for the last couple of laps. Vollering certainly continuing to apply the pressure in this stage, but of course Rosen, like I said, he's on a little bit of a recovery drive at the moment after that incident we saw in the front group, rather the battle for P4 earlier on. He certainly came off better compared to Ilya Drovosikov. That's for certain. Drovosikov is still languishing down in P15, where Rosen has now been able to climb through the field up into 9th place at the moment. Let's check in with your race leaders, though. That's Luciano Wittvoet. Of course, if you're used to Race Room Esports, then you'll know exactly who Luciano Wittvoet is. Tends to get himself stuck in terms of the top level of competition here on Race Room on quite regular occasion. We've got pole position sitter Cody Latowski behind for the moment. Hasn't fallen outside of range, though, compared to Luciano Wittvoet. He's still sitting in that draft coming down the back straight, which is the important thing at this race, at this circuit. You can be a tenth of or so of a second slower through the corners. However, if you're able to maintain that slipstream, you're going to gain a huge benefit down these long straights and keep yourself in contention. So as long as Latowski does that, then potentially he still might be on for a race win at the end of this first race. We are getting towards the halfway point now. Here's Schernel battling with, or at least very close to, Peter Daniel. Daniel, of course, the offensive driver in this situation, residing in P7. There is race control for today. We do have stewards. And of course, they will be looking at things after the event. So for things like that lap 1 incident, for things like the Uval and Stravosikov situation, then they will be looking at things. And if they judge that a penalty is deserved for one or more drivers, then that will happen. And of course, we'll get notification of that at the very end of the proceedings here today to see whether or not a penalty does apply. Don't know whether things are being actively investigated at the moment, but I would have thought with an incident as big as the ones that we've seen that they would be taking a look at that and see if any penalty needs to be applied. I'm going to ride on board with Peter Daniel for a bit, as it is one of your closest battles out there on circuit. Michael Schernel ahead for now. Strategy for Daniel here, follow as closely as possible through these slow speed corners in this first sector to then also prioritize the launch out of turn 3 through turn 4. Now get as much of the slipstream as possible on the way down the Mistral straight into the back straight chicane. See how much Peter Daniel's able to pull up here. See that advantage becoming more and more obvious. More and more kilometers an hour going the way of Peter Daniel. Not quite close enough to be able to make a move into the chicane, although Schernel does have a little bit of a messy line through there and a messy exit as well. That might work out in Daniel's favor. This guy's in a little bit of no man's land at the moment. There are a few seconds of drift of Bo Dixon ahead. Daniel's still not confident to make a move on the German ahead of him. Just biding his time for the moment, playing things very patiently. You can see the alternate lines being taken through the long right of 6. It has been noted how sketchy sometimes these cars can be coming off the corner. Of course, they are GT3 cars, so they do have the assists, they do have the ABS and the traction control. The traction control more relevant, of course, for the power off the corners, but you're still seeing these cars fishtail around a bit sometimes, and you can see Peter Daniel getting a good run through the final couple of corners, might potentially be able to make this one happen over Schernel. Peter Daniel's got the outside. The outside typically hasn't been very strong down in towards turn number 1, so Schernel might still have this one, although Peter Daniel has been able to get himself clear by the time they get to the apex of the corner. So good pass made by Peter Daniel. That promotes himself up into P6 for race number 1. We'll have a look down the order, why not, shall we, as Michi Geisler and Søren Jager close for P19 and 20. So notwithstanding that battle for 6th place between Daniel and Schernel, this is one of the closer ones out there on circuit as well now. Again, you can see the different lines being taken through. That is parts driver preference, part trying to size up your opposition. Do something unorthodox, try and scare them out of line. but for Zoran Yaga, nothing has worked for now. We'll continue to have a look at his progress to see if he makes any progress over the course of this one. Let's have a look back at that battle for P6 though, because Cernal's certainly not out of this one. He's remaining about a 1/10.5 of a second behind. Certainly close enough down the back straights to be able to have an opportunity. Of course, Cernal, through this final sector, does have to have half a mind about keeping an eye on Bence Farkas behind, the Hungarian who has closed up to this battle. And there we go, that might be the mistake from Peter Daniel that Cernal needs to try and get himself back past through this final sector. Wheel to wheel, Peter Daniel maintains the position for now, maintains P6. Farkas always on the outside looking in here as well. He's the third car in line in this little grouping as they head their way out of the final corner now. Cernal getting a good run, good traction out of the final corner, but I don't think he'll be close enough to make things happen towards turn number 1. Like I said, it is quite a not the easiest place to try and get by. Of course, we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen in this exact battle. It requires a huge advantage in terms of the run out of that final corner to make it happen. We are inside the final 5 minutes though. Of course, once that clock hits 0, that will dictate that the current lap is the final lap. So there's no +1 business here in this series. Once that clock hits 0, the next flag the leader will see coming across the start-finish line will be the checkered. Back straight once again. This is the closest battle out there on circuit for the moment between Peter Daniel and Nico Cernal. Cernal's going to angle towards the inside now for the chicane. Can he get it done into here? No, doesn't quite have enough of an overlap to be able to commit on the brakes into there and get the move done. We'll ride on board with Cernal as he, again, just sit in that draft all the way down to the fast right here at the end of the Mistral Straights. Closer and closer, and now trying to go for the move, at least looking towards the outside. Here is Cernal. Is he successful in this one though? That's the question. It's a long right-hander on the outside, doesn't quite have an advantage through there. Daniel able to put up a good defensive effort so far, and oh, has Cernal overcooked it? He's able to gather it up. A big slide through the left. And now what does Bence Farkas do with this one? Because he's been waiting oh so patiently as the third car in line in this battle, but he hasn't stuck his nose in anywhere just yet. I think it might start to be go time for the Hungarian inside of these final couple of minutes if he wants to get himself any higher than P8 in terms of the finishing result for race 1. Of course, once this is done, you do still want to stick around because we will have the second race with the top 10 reverse grid coming up pretty much directly after this one. Cernal continuing to press the issue here. This is a lot of pressure being piled back onto the rear bumper of the Czech driver of Daniel. We've seen a few mistakes from Daniel as well, and that will give Cernal certainly a bit of confidence that he'll be able to get this pass done. Try and force another mistake, perhaps. There are drivers that do crack under a huge amount of pressure. Of course, the best drivers try and keep that under wraps and try and keep focused in these situations, but is Daniel able to? Here comes Cernal again, nose to the inside. There's no threat in that move. It's just there just to make himself look big in the wing mirrors of the driver ahead. Never going to intend to send the dive bomb into the chicane. At the end of the straight is where typically Cernal has been fastest through this fast right-hand, and you can see it close up just a little bit there. Not quite as quick this time compared to Peter Daniel than we've seen on previous laps. He's taking a slightly wider line through as well. Closes up for the second apex of the right. Another move perhaps needs to be made in this final sector. This is where we've seen the move set up, at least so far in this event. We are getting towards the end, and the tyres not as good as they were at the very start. will be the start of the final lap, of course. Let's check in with your race leader. Luciano Wittvoet has completely run away from Latkowski. It's been a stellar drive from Luciano Wittvoet to be able to gain a 3-second advantage over the Macedonian in seconds. That's the sort of winning margin that you like to see. Of course, things a little bit closer there for P3, Enzo Flipao and Sinyangine. P3, P4 within a second, and in fact within half a second. Now, potentially Sinyangine might have something to say about this one inside of the final lap. It's looking unlikely given his distance, but again, it only needs one mistake for that inside, outside to open up and that potential opportunity. Back through the order, you do have more fighting though. All of a sudden, this has sprung up for P12 between Marius Zabder. We've got Royce Rocco and Jan Courtois here as well, or Courtois. Great stuff back there. Peter Daniel, Schernel, that is still a fight that's going on as well. It's getting very, very close indeed. Schernel's going to follow as close as he dares, coming off the chicane in the middle of the back straight. Now on the second half of that back straight, Schernel continuing to draw in his competitor, but can he do anything to try and get past in these final couple of corners? Because it is going to have to happen in this final sector if it's going to happen at all. There is your race leader of Luciano Wittvoet, who has been an absolutely, been in absolute dominant form here today. In race number 1, he'll head his way through the final couple of corners, and it will be Luciano Wittvoet from Ballas Esports to take the race win here for race number 1 of event number 2 in the NGK SPARK PLUG Esports Cup. Here's the battle for P6 still going on, though. Peter Daniel might just about be able to hold on to this one, and he will. He gets the drive out of the final corner, and a very well-deserved P6 for Peter Daniel, considering the pressure from the drivers behind him. Schernel has a little bit of a wiggle in frustration as he heads his way past. But it was all on him to try and make that pass. Obviously Peter Daniel's not exactly just going to move out of the way and let him go, even if he is the faster driver in clear air. We're seeing the rest of the drivers head their way across the line now. And soon we'll get to see our unofficial race results from race number 1, of course, pending stewards review. Towards the bottom of the order, we're seeing the last couple of runners head their way through now. Villa Creevy, Pedro Gomez, Christoph Nagy. We've got Elisa Adai as well. We're waiting for to get their lap complete. There they are, out of the final corner now. And that should be it for race number 1, of course. Here's the unofficial race results then. Luciano Wittvoet P1 with Latovsky P2. Filipao P3 with Guinea P4. Bo Dixon P5 with Daniel P6. Schernel P7 and Farkas in P8. Drosten P9. Dravosikov P10. And that one kind of snuck under our nose somewhat because Dravosikov has been able to recover to P10, and that's important because that gives him pole position in the reverse grid for race number 2. So that is about as well as Dravosikov could have done after that incident earlier on in the race. He gets himself in the best starting position possible for race number 2. So the day is certainly not done for Ilya Dravosikov. We'll see how he does in the race coming up. You can see the rest of the runners now down to P28 on the finishing results. And of course, like I said, it is a top 10 reverse grid here for race 2, and we won't really be having a break at all as we have got the gridding procedure underway already for this second race. Again, another 20-minute event, but the top 10 has been turned on its head. What does race number 2 hold here at Circuit Paul Ricard? It was an intriguing race number 1. Not the best race number 1 by any means in terms of the fighting, but of course, things can change here, race 2, especially considering that reverse grid. It does tend to spice things up somewhat. Maximum 20 seconds left before we get ourselves the red lights and then the field released for race 2. Here we go then, race 2 of the evening in the NGK SPARK PLUG ESPORTS CUP. Here on Race Room is about to get itself underway. We had an intriguing race number 1, but race number 2 has now gone green, and for the second time in a row, we get a drive-through penalty for a false start from Tinian Grossman towards the very back of the order. And we see someone coming off of the pit lane for the pit lane start as well. Ival Rusin looking to try and challenge for the race lead into towards turn number 1 on Dravosikov. Dravosikov's able to hold that one and hold firm though. Farkas and Cernil going side by side for P2, a little bit further behind. However, Farkas able to secure P3, excuse me, with Peter Daniel in P4. Cernil down to P5 now with Bo Dixon in tow. We've got Sinin Guinea going side by side with the British driver further down. P6 and 7 going wheel to wheel, and there's Guinea getting himself down the inside, slotting himself ahead. And Luciano Wittvoet, well, he started P10, he's already up into P8, so that's your race winner from race number 1. Already making the moves to get himself further up the order. Of course, top 4 in points at the end of the day. All these 2 races will get themselves a slot in the final events, and they don't have to compete in any more races apart from that one. But of course, there's still the overall championship, and still well, all the positions down to P16 in the overall standings that will still get themselves a slot as well. So it's a little bit complicated, yes, but it'll work out in the end, trust me. But Luciano Wittvoet, he did just gain the position over Bo Dixon there. So Wittvoet from 10th to 7th in the space of just half a lap. Pretty good going for the Dutch driver. Looking at towards the very front, Rusin P2 starting to fall off the back of Dravosikov at the moment. Dravosikov putting pedal to the metal at the moment, trying to extend that gap on this first lap. It's up above, well, rather roughly near 6 or 7 tenths of a second at the moment. And Farkas, well, he's applying all the pressure to Ival Rusin from behind. He's going to try and go down the inside at the left here. Hungarian clambering up into P2. Rusin losing the position. Rusin has to be a little bit careful now, especially coming through that final corner. We've already seen an instant coming through there and across the line to complete lap number 1. A lot has changed inside of the top 10 compared to the starting grid. Wittvoet up into 7th place, and here comes Rusin with the response potentially on Ben Farkas, looking to threaten on the way through turn number 1. And well, Farkas has a bit of a compromised line coming through there. It's not exactly ideal, and now Rusin can try and capitalize on that one on this little run down in towards the next chicane. Still can't quite draw himself alongside. Yes, had a slight overlap, but sometimes it's better to give that one up and avoid an incident. Oh, speaking of an incident, here Daniel running into the back of the Israeli, coming through the right-hander, and well, it did spit Rusin up over the curb. Hopefully he didn't get himself a slowdown penalty as a result of that. It doesn't seem like he has. He does decide to try and weave down the back straight to try and break the draft of the cars behind. But that is usually something that's done in vain, at least from my experience. Says, oh no, who's that gone around? That's Peter Daniel. Peter Daniel has gone around. Cernil's involved in it as well. Through the chicane. Big instant there. Peter Daniel down to P10. Cernil in P13. They don't have too much damage to their cars as a result of that one, but you see Cernil's now concerned about yet more drivers trying to freight train him at the moment, because we've Geister is trying to get past. We've got side by side between Ree and Parvan behind as well. Cernil exploring the track limits out there and keeping himself ahead for the moment, at least on Sebastian Ree. But Geister was able to file his way through, and it stacked up this field. Oh, who was that going all sorts of sideways through the corner there? Might have been Daniel Parvan in that situation. The Romanian driver now still attempting to get past Sebastian Ree. The inside for the final corner is a good place to be, and he's able to park it ahead of the German and secure the spot. Soren Jager and Royce Rocco going wheel to wheel behind them as, well, everyone wants to get themselves a little bit of side-by-side action at the moment, I get the feeling. Especially in this mid-pack where things have been so spicy since the very start of the season. battle for P5 on circuit. Sinigine trying to recover a little bit from a few trials and tribulations earlier on. Bo Dixon 6th place. British driver trying to cause a little bit of a problem, however not close enough to apply so much pressure onto the rear bumper of that car ahead of him, so he's just going to have to bide his time for now and try and work on closing that gap up a little bit more. So that's Guinea feels a little bit more threatened. Here is Marius Zabda having an issue with Enzo Filipao, and of course we've got race 2, or rather race 1, second place finisher of Lotowski behind this one as well. And in fact, Lotowski's pretty much gone backwards since the start of the race. Of course, we would have started in P9, now down in 11th place. It's the opposite situation to Luciano Wittvoet. Of course, Luciano Wittvoet taking the race win, starting P10, is already up into P4. This just shows how strong of a driver he is. Seeing drivers fall down the order, it seemed like there was a big incident back here, and that's a bit of damage to the front ends of Nick Schwenk there. Not entirely sure what has happened back here either way. A few drivers involved, few drivers picking up tiny bits of damage here and there. He's the onboard with Yuval Rosen and Svarkas through the windshields. Alpha P2, but ahead of both of these guys, Ilya Dravosikov has continued to try and extend the gap to around about a second at this point, getting dangerously close to breaking the slipstream to those cars behind. Does extend the back about a second here in this one, so if you're outside of that margin, then you start to pull away relatively quickly if you're, well, if you are actually faster in clear air. Behind that particular battle, of course, we have this. We have the hard-charging Luciano Wittvoet. I mentioned earlier, he's had an incredible drive today, not only taking race 1 win, but starting P10 and already up into P4, and we haven't even got half this race done yet. So Luciano Wittvoet, I mean, given the right set of circumstances, potentially might be able to get himself onto the podium here. And who knows, might be able to go all the way for the race win if he has this much pace behind the wheel of that Mercedes. Still about a 1.5 second gap up to Yuval Rosen, or rather a second gap back to up to Yuval Rosen. So certainly within the realm of the possibility to get onto the podium. It would be a very, very good points haul for Luciano Wittvoet, and it will basically secure him in terms of points to get himself inside of that top 4 to get that automatic qualification spot into the final race to compete for those prizes. Very thankful that everyone's able to join us here for this one here on the Race Room Esports YouTube, and of course on NGK SPARK PLUG's social media as well. An intriguing event so far. My name's Corey Maddock, I'm your English commentator, and well, we've got ourselves a little bit of a lull in the action somewhat here. Of course, there are still close battles going on. Of course, we've got this for P7 between Vollering and Daniel. You've got Philip Au involved in all this as well. Absolutely nose to tail with the tight and twisty section, but for those top positions, things are spread out a little bit more. Was that a mistake there from Vollering that has potentially allowed Per Daniel to try and draw himself alongside here, coming down that long back straight? Daniel will opt to duck back in line, duck back inside the slipstream, and potentially look to make a move elsewhere. Another look to the inside. We haven't seen too many attempts down the inside at the chicane down the back straight though, so not surprised that hasn't come off for him this time around. You're better just to try and make sure you get that good run and that advantage with the line through the chicane and then off the corner to be able to make a run happen and down in towards the middle part of the second sector. Pau getting very, very close behind. Still no threatening moves being made just yet. Daniel also angling towards the inside in some of these corners, but there's no sting in that sort of look. It's just a scare more than anything else. Here comes Daniel though, gets the up and under, at least an attempt. On Lucas Vollering. Vollering has the inside for the final corner, should be able to keep the head, and well, here comes Philip Pau then, trying to capitalize on the compromise line that Daniel had to take through that final corner. Slipstream City all the way down in towards turn 1 as well, but I've said many times this isn't the ideal point where you can get past. Riding on the back then of Lucas Vollering, the German driver, 7th place at the moment. We'll see how the points stack up here at the end of the day. Of course, as soon as we get that from race control, we'll be able to relay that onto you as well. A little bit of a bobble up over the curb for Vollering. Perhaps going to upset the run somewhat through these corners and of course onto the back straight. So you can see here Daniel just a tenth of a second behind, less than a car length, stalking his prey. Does he angle to the inside? He has at least a look. He has an overlap down into the chicane, but is he able to complete it? No. Backs out of it a little bit. Looks to try and prioritize the run through the corner instead to have a challenge into the next braking zone potentially. Tovsky's on the back of this one as well. He's been able to improve position up into P10, but still not an ideal race 2 for the Macedonian as we see these guys try to settle their differences once again. Vollering continuing to lead this little pack around, and Daniel has just been really finding no way by. It seems like the Vollering's car is just a bit of a brick wall that he has to try and get through, and Philip Pau certainly not helping the cause by sticking it down the inside at the final corner like that. Be losing a little bit of the ground coming down the pit straight here to Daniel, and Daniel with the inside line into turn 1 going to have the advantage, but does Philip Pau decide to hang it around the outsides there? Well, he might not have a choice because we're seeing, you know, the inside be so strong into there that you simply just can't carry enough momentum around the outside to be able to make a pass into turn 1. It's simply not going to happen, at least from the trends that we've been seeing so far in this race. Here's the battle for the race lead that has snuck up on us a little bit. Farkas has been able to eat into that 1 second gap that Dvořákov was able to pull, and now it's only 0.3 of a second. So we potentially might have a race on in terms of the battle for the race lead at the end of this one. And, well, we'd certainly have a battle for P3 at the moment. Suddenly this race has come alive. Sinyan Gune trying to get through a Yuval Rosen. And, well, he's going to follow very, very closely coming off the corner now as we'll see him dive towards driver's left-hand side. Sinyan Gune nose ahead at the moment, but he's on the outside for the next turn for the right-hander. And Rosen's able to slot himself ahead. Gune is again attempting to look down the inside of these corners. That one doesn't have any sting in it though, as they wind it down through the long right of turn 6. And, well, maybe those were the first shots fired, and, well, there's another one as Rosen pushes wide and Guine is able to get the positioning on the inside back, but again he just can't do anything with it seems. Despite these mistakes that Rosen's been making, Guine's not able to capitalize, and now he has to be concerned about behind as well, because here comes Luciano Witwer, race 1 winner, gets crowded off the circuit through the final corner. He's looking for more. He's looking for as many points as possible, and not willing to share it with anyone else. There's the battle for the race lead going on ahead as well. All of a sudden in these final 6 and 7 minutes, well, things are starting to come alive, and these drivers knowing what's on the line in terms of a qualification spot at the moment. Sinyan actually keeps Luciano Vitvoet at bay for now, but Guinea's over-committed to the corner there, pushes out wide, and Vitvoet is able to slot in underneath. As, oh no, there's a lap, Ben Farkas potentially having a problem. Luciano Vitvoet up into P3. What happens to Ben Farkas? I don't know. He was in P2. He was potentially challenging for the race leads, but maybe a single car error through the first sector has sent him down to P6. So now, new P2 driver is Yuval Rosen. Ilya Dravosikov now has a 1.2 second gap back to him, so he's feeling a little bit safer. Closest battle is the one for P4 between Guinea and Dixon this time around. Oh, how things change in quite quick succession here at Paul Ricard. You can never count your chickens until they've hatched. And Bo Dixon, well, looking for P4. Forcing Guinea to take the insides there, looking to try and get the line back underneath. Not going to be successful. Less than 4 minutes to go now. Everything calms down once again, at least for P2 and back, but we know how quickly things can change. There's Ilya Dravosikov getting his way across the line. This will not be the start of the final lap. This will be the start of the penultimate, the second to last lap for Ilya Dravosikov. What a recovery it would be from what was a bit of a nightmare of race number 1. But getting a recovery, getting up into P10, benefiting from the reverse grid pole position, and holding it for now. That's all you need to do to try and recover some points in rounds like this. It might not guarantee him a top 4 finish in terms of points. We'll have to see. Of course, that would be the ideal situation for every single one of these drivers. They don't want to do more races than is necessary. Luciano Vitvoet getting a whole bunch of oversteer off the corner there. Drops a bit of time to Yuval Rosen ahead. We do have to give credit where credit is due. Luciano Vitvoet has been the man to beat so far in these races at Paul Ricard. It was a dominant win in race 1, and what a drive in race 2 to bring that car from P10 to P3. And who knows, it might be P2 at the end of this, depending on what happens here in the closing moments. Next lap will be the final lap, of course. Dravosikov does not have to worry. Up to about over 1.5 seconds as the advantage in the race lead at the moment. Not under any sort of pressure, but still can't afford to make any mistake. Yuval Rosen has to be a little bit paranoid about Luciano Vitvoet at the moment. Vitvoet certainly no stranger to going for optimistic moves. Coming out the final corner now then. This is going to be the start of the final lap. You can see visually the gap between P1 P2 is pretty healthy for this sort of racing between Ilya Dravosikov and Yuval Rosen. Rosen's more concerned about what's going on behind him at the moment, with Vitvoet being so close and Sinyan not being too far away as well. Rosen has just sort of counted himself out for the race win at the moment. I mean, he could have counted him out for the race win about 3 laps ago. It's all a battle for P2. The very dying moments here. Rosen neat and tidy through the first sector. Vitvoet trying to get the drive off here. To carry all of that speed down the Mistral straight to have an opportunity at some point later on in the lap. We will ride on board with Luciano Vitvo. Is it going to be a P1 and a P2 for Luciano Vitvo here today to try and secure his slot in the final race of the season to compete for those prizes? I mean, P3 might still be good enough. But anyway, it's all for glory, though. He wants to go for P2. That, you can't count out the racing driver inside of these guys. They see a position, they want to try and go for it, no matter what the point situation is. Rosen under a lot of pressure coming in towards that final sector as Vitvo had a little bit of a look there. Rosen still leads the trio around for the moment. Yune looking to the inside on Vitvo as well. There might have been a little bit of a tap between the two of them there. Yune trying to gain position as well. His point situation might be a little bit more not as clear-cut as Luciano Vitvo's situation. I think as a result of that, Vitvo is going to be a little bit too far away from Yuval Rosen to be able to make this happen at the very end of this race. He'll stick it down the inside regardless. He's not going to get there though, as ahead, Ilya Dravosikov takes the race win here for race number 2 at Circuit Paul Ricard. The Swiss driver from Ballas Esports gets maximum points at the end of race 2. But the man of the moment is certainly Luciano Vitvo. He won race 1, P3 race 2. That is definitely enough to get himself a slot in the final race of the season. But it's still an unknown for everyone else though. How do they stack up with regards to the points at the end of the day? That's the question we're all asking. Of course, I will get the update to you as fast as I am able to. As soon as it's given to me by race control, I will let you know. But everyone else coming across and finishing their races now. Soon we'll get ourselves the unofficial race results from race number 2 of the NGK SPARK PLUG Esports Championship at Paul Ricard. It's the second event, so technically the 4th race, as we see Ilya Dravosikov take the race win with Yuval Rosen in P2. Luciano Vitvo P3, we're seeing Guinea P4, Ben Farkas P5, Luke Bodixon P6, Wollering P7, Latowski P8, Daniel P9 and Philip Howe in P10. You can see the rest of the runners cycle their way through. Some of those drivers hoping and praying that they're somewhere near the top 16 in terms of overall points at this stage in the season. Of course, the top 4 that have scored the the most points from this particular event will get themselves qualified into the next into the final race automatically. So with that, of course, we'll take a little bit of a breather here, of course. You can see we still have a handful of moments before we can get to the end of the stream. Of course, we do have to get ourselves driver interviews out of the way as well. Those will be coming up very, very shortly indeed. Of course, we'll get to speak to potentially Ilya Dravosikov here in just a handful of moments' time. Once he gets his camera set up on Zoom, no doubt. But of course, we're waiting for a couple of things. We're waiting for those drivers, and of course, we are waiting for the official points order from race control as well. But for the moment, we'll just have to take a breather and just talk about what's happened today. Of course, it was Luciano Vitvo taking the race win in race number 1, and of course, it was another Ballas Esports driver taking the race win in race 2 as well. That is Ilya Dravosikov. It was a fantastic run for him at the very end of the proceedings here today to be able to recover. Because, of course, for Ilya Dravosikov, it was not a very good race 1. Getting caught up in an instant early on, getting the recovery drive up into P2, getting the pole position for race 2 really, really worked out in his favour. We will get ourselves... potentially, I mean, in the meantime, I can put my wonderful face on it. My face is not wonderful, let's just say that. But while we wait for the drivers to get themselves ready in the Zoom call, we can have a little bit of a conversation with the chat. Of course, thank you very much, guys, for supporting the stream, both on the Race Room Esports YouTube channel, of course, the NGK SPARK Plugs YouTube and social media as well. We couldn't really put these things together without you. We've got Mikhail Lapanek saying the game destroyed me. Apparently the game crashed when he was driving an 11th. That is unfortunate. Sometimes the issues do happen in sim racing. It's just like mechanical issues in the real world. Sometimes they happen, and there's not a lot you can really do about it. But for the moment, Again, we're still waiting for these drivers to get themselves ready. Doug Roberts saying some great racing. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for watching as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to commentate these races here in this one. But lots of fans of Vallis Esports there in the chat as well. Let's have a little bit of a recap of what's potentially is on the horizon, though. Of course, we've got event number 2 over and done with here today. Of course, the leaderboard is open for race number 3 right now. I mean, it was open yesterday as well. But if you feel like you can get yourself a good enough lap time at Imola to join us for race number 3 and potentially get yourself a slot in the final race of the season to compete for those points, then do go ahead and try and compete in the leaderboard. It is live now on Race Room, and well, if you finish well, then potentially you might be able to get yourself a slot in that race. We're still waiting for the drivers. Hopefully we'll get one of them to turn on their cameras and turn on their microphones at some point. Maybe we can get Ilya up first here in just a handful of moments. But it's actually we can talk to him right now potentially. Ilya, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can absolutely hear you. How were things today? It seemed like I was just telling the stream that the race number 1 didn't exactly go the best way for you, getting caught up in things that weren't your fault. But crucially, you were able to get P10 in race 1. That gave you pole position for race 2. Was that absolutely crucial to scoring as many points as possible today?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't expect that. I, of course, didn't expect to spin or be in some kind of conflict during a race fight, but it happened. I think I dropped down to P21, and it was quite lucky that I actually got to top 10. The more surprising to me is that I didn't practice at all for today's race. I just jumped in and only had 40 minutes and showed my great pace at the second race. So it worked out pretty fine.
That's not too bad with no practice. I think it goes to show that when you're a very good driver on Race Room like you can just sort of jump into things and get yourself a decent result at least. But what's the situation like now? Because of course we're still waiting for confirmation from Race Control about what the points order's like. Do you think that you've been able to make it inside the top 4? Or is that quite unlikely, and you're just sort of relying on those points to then finish in the top 16 later on?
I think it's going to be likely pretty borderline. I mean, the second race gave so much points. It will be crucial, but yeah, it will be somewhere between P4 or P5, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hope for you that it is P4 and you can get yourself qualified into the final race of the season. Of course, if you do get into that final race, your next event will be the Nordschleife. But if you do not, then potentially you might have to attend the race at Imola as well. So if you do finish P5 or below, and you do have to do that race at Imola, are you feeling confident coming into that circuit that you'll be able to get it done there?
Well, next fun fact: I've done I've never driven that much there. Maybe 20 or 30 laps in total. Yeah. All right, P3 overall. Great.
well, there we go.
P3 overall.
We'll see how it works out for you, Ilya. Thank you very much for speaking to us here today, and we certainly wish you the best of luck in whatever event that you're doing next here in this one. As we actually can tell you, in fact, where you are. I've gotten a message from the race administrators. You're actually P3, so you do qualify. So you don't have to do Imola. Yay!
Yeah. Wow. This is great. I'm very happy.
Yeah. So congratulations on the qualification, and we'll see you at the Nordschleife, I suppose.
Yeah. That's great. Great. Thank you very much, man.
Not a problem. That was Ilya Dravoskov taking the race win in race number 2 there, and potentially we might be able to speak to Yuval Rosen as well if he's ready here in the Zoom call and can get himself unmuted. We'll have to wait and see. And in fact, I can actually bring up his camera as well. That would be fantastic. But Yuval, how was the racing here today? Because it seemed like you were certainly involved in the thick of things today in the battles in and around where you were out there on circuit. Was that pretty fun for you?
Yeah, the race was fun. In race 1, though, Ilya spun ahead of me, so I got stuck a little bit, but it went all right after that. Race 2 was great, finished P2. Yeah.
Yeah, it's seemingly like it did. Well, the racing kind of worked out in your favor there in that one. It's how fun is it to sort of be battling that close wheel to wheel with drivers that are pretty close in terms of pace? You know, it must be pretty entertaining for you, if a little bit nervous, because of course you never know whether you're going to make contact and gonna have a big accident. But just take me through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was great battles. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we certainly enjoyed watching it as well. Of course, you know, this is one of the first opportunities for us to get to see. Of course, you competed in the round at Dubai as well. Of course, you know, if you are not able to get yourself into the race, into the final race by qualifying inside the top 4, potentially we might have to go to Imola. Are you comfortable with Imola as a circuit?
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with Imola than Paul Ricard. Actually, I practice there a lot with other cars as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will very much look forward to seeing you there, Uval. Very good racing here today. I can tell you, however, that you have not finished inside the top 4 for today, so you will potentially have to do things at Imola. But
Okay.
we'll see you then, and hopefully you can get yourself qualified into that final race.
Okay, cool.
All
Thanks.
Right, there we go. Thank you very much there, Uval. As we do, in fact, have our results from the championship standings for, or rather the official word from the championship standings for today. So these are the points just coming out of today, remember. This isn't the accumulated points over the course of the season. We can just have a look at that one now. So we can see the top 4 drivers that have qualified themselves into the final race of the season. That is Luciano Wittvoet with 70 points. Sinyan Guinea with 54 points, tied with Dravosikov actually there. So those 2 drivers, P2, P3 in the order, are able to get themselves qualified. And actually, Cody Lotovsky is able to get himself qualified as well. So those are the top 4 drivers here today that will be able to get themselves a slot in that final race to compete for those prizes. Of course, the top prize for getting tickets to go and see the 2022 24-hour race at the Nürburgring and getting themselves a slot in the SX hospitality as well. But that's the current order. Of course, all of these points for the rest of the drivers will count towards their situation involving themselves inside the top 16. So even if they don't finish in the top 4 in points in any of the races to come, they will still be able to qualify into that final race if they finish in top 16 overall. That's the situation there. But with that, we will have to end, as we've got ourselves another race, another 2 races, in fact, in the bag here in the NGK SPARK PLUG's ESPORTS CUP. But of course, you don't want to really tune out of things. But of course, in a couple of weeks' time, on the 17th of March, we have race number 3, a 3rd opportunity for these drivers to qualify themselves into that final race. It will be taking place at Imola as well. I'll be here for it. I hope you're there for it. But for now, I will have to say, unfortunately, goodbye.